How we doing? How we doing? This is Destination Denver, Colorado, and today, listen, it's the elephant in the room. You're thinking about moving to Denver, Colorado, but you're asking yourself, can I afford it? Well, we're here to talk about it, and we're starting right now. All right, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jimmy Everett, and listen, if you're interested in learning all the ins and outs, pros and cons of moving to or around the Denver metro area and the Front Range for that matter, then this is the channel for you. So that subscribe button and notification icon you see on your screen, make sure you click on that as I'm dropping new videos for you each and every week. And as much as I try to be informative here on camera, I'm also a licensed mortgage broker covering the entire state of Colorado and team with some of Denver's most talented realtors. And we're helping people move here each and every day. So that number and email you see, know that I am always the person, answer your phone calls, answer your texts, answer your emails. There, winning if you need me. Now that we're done with that fun-filled stuff, let's get to what we're here for, and that is, can you truly afford to live in Denver, Colorado? All right, so first and foremost, we can't have a conversation about cost of living without having some perspective behind it. And at the end of the day, a lot of the information I provide is going to depend on where you are coming from, what type of income you make, maybe what kind of savings you have in the bank. Going to dinner now at 46 years old looks vastly different than going to dinner when I was 22 years old. I would have hated me and the check that came to the table when I was a young man. So certainly, if you're moving here from a New York, a Los Angeles, a San Francisco, compared to if you're moving here from a Cleveland, a Chicago, an Iowa, I know that's a state, not a city, then those factors are going to be different. Now, diving right in, first and foremost, when it comes to cost of living, is going to be a roof over your head and how much housing costs whether you are buying or renting. Now, as of the making of this video, a house in Denver costs you roughly $650,000 on average. Now, that's including attached homes, condos, and single families altogether, and that is about 30% higher than the national average. So for all that smack talk about people not wanting to live in Denver, there's still a lot of people who want to live in the Denver area. Now, if we're talking about rents, don't get too excited. The average rent is about $2,000, but that was technically for a one bed, one bath. Now, this is where numbers can be a little deceiving because if I look on multiple sites, yes, they say the average apartment rents for $2,000 for a one bed, one bath. But there are a ton of places where I haven't necessarily helped people because I can't do as much with helping with rentals. But I've talked to plenty of people who have found decent rentals for $1,400, $1,600, maybe $1,800 with one or two bedrooms. And same thing with price points as far as homes. If we're going to talk about single family homes and detached houses, you may very well find a lot of properties that are above that $650 mark. Whereas if you're looking for condos and townhomes, you're likely to find many properties in the Denver metro area below that $650 mark. And it certainly depends on location, right? If we're talking about your average home in Aurora sits around $460,000, your average home in Boulder sits at $750,000, and if we take out attached houses, condos, and townhomes, the average price in Boulder is $850,000. And if you ask locals in Boulder if they could find a single family home for $850,000, they'd probably chuckle at you and say, no, it's well over $1 million. So everything is going to be location specific. And again, everything is going to come back to what you are used to paying and what your income working or living here in Denver will allow you to pay. I know it. I'm so definitive. Now, at least for people considering buying a home, one of the key components of Denver's market is the fact that our property tax rates are lower than the national average. In fact, Denver sits around 0.5% to maybe 0.6% of the home value. And for those of you who have not owned a home before, that may not mean much, and understandably so. It didn't mean much to me before I owned my house. But for people who do own homes and maybe in areas like a New York, Texas, Illinois, areas around Cleveland, areas where property taxes are well over 1%, areas where you are paying tens of thousands of dollars every year in property tax, you're going to save a ton of money in property tax here in Denver. Now, there's give and take, right? A lot of those areas where property taxes are higher, home values are also lower. Another key component in this is the fact that Colorado has a state income tax of 4.4%. So certainly if you are coming here from a state such as Texas where you don't have a state income tax and you're not a homeowner, that state income tax that you're paying to Colorado more than negates any benefit perhaps of that property tax. I shouldn't say any, but could negate some of that benefit you get from moving your home here. And certainly if you're renting, property tax doesn't matter to you anyway. And talking about some of your day-to-day items, if you're looking at vehicle registrations, I always think about when I was stationed in Connecticut in the military and how much it was to register a vehicle in those days. Thankfully, I drove, an old beat up GMC car, but we'll talk about that later. But here in Denver, it goes strictly off of the value of the car. If you buy a new car, you could expect to pay on average between $500 to $1,000. Certainly, you will see the more expensive cars, you're going to be over $1,000. I think the last time I registered, a new vehicle, 2016. I still drive that same car, so don't judge me. I remember my registration being somewhere around $1,700. It was a kick in the gut at the time. I say a punch. I don't even know what words I'm using at this point, folks, but I can tell you it's expensive. But luckily, as the value of your car comes down, so too does that registration, to the point now where my yearly registration is around $150 to $175 a month for that same vehicle. I joke about being political. The average price of gas as of making this video is $3.42. It's higher in some states, it's lower in others. So we do have some good news in this, and that is, or maybe not even good news because things are expensive, but groceries are on the national average. So you're gonna pay about $4 for a gallon of milk, about $4 for a dozen eggs, about $3 for a loaf of bread. I don't know why milk, eggs, and bread are like the core of what we consider for those things. Maybe throw in some bottled water, but we're along the national average there. Now, I skipped right over utilities. Utilities also on the national average, but also I think that this is going to be perspective because utilities change throughout the year, they change throughout the month. So, we've had a pretty hot summer. If I'm cranking the AC, obviously the utility bill is going to skyrocket. Colorado as a whole, and here in Denver, in the Denver metro area, we've had some pretty mild winters the last few years. Last year got pretty chilly for the most part, but otherwise, the temperature has not stayed drastically low. So where it used to be your winter bill is what got you, now, at least for me, it's been more the summer months. Of course, it does not help that my wife likes to keep the house like 1 billion degrees in the winter and then still kind of 1 billion degrees in the summer. She's Venezuelan, she likes warm weather. What can I tell you? But I completely digress. Let's get to daycare, because what's better than being able to send your children to a nice place where they can learn and be around other kids? My daughter is actually there right now. Now, the average for daycare in the Denver metro area, again, lines up with the national average between $1,000 to $1,400, depending on your child's age. Now, I can tell you, for those of you who are going to be moving here looking at daycare, we looked at a lot of them, and I did not find one that was $1,000 to $1,400. Now, that might be, more of the private sector, smaller places, some of the more, I would not say reputable, some of the ones with the best reviews, some of the ones that we explored were all in the $1,800 to $2,200 range, depending on how old your kiddo was. The younger, the more expensive they are, which I thought didn't happen until high school, but apparently toddlers are pricey. Now, also something to consider when we're talking about cost of living in Denver is going to be sales tax, and that's going to depend on what county, what area you are in. So, for example, Denver has a sales tax of 8%. And yes, I haven't lived in other states for many years. Is it annoying to pay 8% on the goods you purchase? Sure is. It's higher in certain cities, lower in others, but that is around the average, and Denver sits at 8%. Now, in doing research as far as the type of money people are making, the type of lifestyle they want to live, I found some interesting statistics, if you want, and an interesting survey of Denver, Colorado locals who were talking about how much money they needed to make in order to feel comfortable. So the average salary made in the household based on this survey was $122,000. Now, this is strictly a survey. We're not talking about like state statistics or Denver metro statistics. But in this survey, the average household income was about $122,000. Now, when people were asked if they were single and how much money they needed to make in order to feel comfortable, that term comfortable, living in the Denver metro area, the answer was $80,000 a year. Now, for a family of 4 or more, that answer nearly doubled. The answer was over $150,000 a year for a family of 4 to live comfortably. So again, based on a survey, how accurate it is, but I feel as though that is somewhat realistic. I feel as though making 80 grand living by yourself, I would think, probably renting an apartment, kind of living your life, 80 grand is going to be healthy. And 150 grand, it depends on how many kiddos you have, and it depends on how many of them are in daycare based on that $1,800 to $2,200 I mentioned. And then as far as entertainment and lifestyle, listen, I could have gone down a rabbit hole. I could have told you the average price of concert tickets and sporting events and things like that. Be realistic. Most of that is on the secondary market anyway, right? So the better the concert, the more pricey it is. Sporting events. The Denver Broncos actually look like they might be decent this year for the first time in 10 years. I'm not getting ahead of myself. We still might suck, but ticket prices will probably go up, whereas when they were terrible, you could get cheap tickets. If you want to go to a basketball game or a hockey, the Nuggets and Avs, they're really good. They get a lot of fans. Their ticket prices are expensive. You want to go see the Colorado Rockies? Again, they kind of suck. You can get a ticket for $1. So everything there going to be perspective. When it comes to going out on a night on the town, I will say Denver restaurants are pricey. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a nice restaurant. I think you could go to an Italian restaurant, Mexican food, things that are not that expensive to make necessarily, and you'll still easily spend 40, 50, 60 bucks, especially if you're having, a cocktail or two. Your bill might hit 100 at just about any modest restaurant in town. Things get wild. Restaurants really like charging for their drinks. This might be a national phenomenon, but for the last 12 years or so, I've been in a little bubble. Maybe I got to travel a bit more, but if you're going to go out on the town, be prepared to spend a little money. Now to wrap up, what I always like to do is to take some cities where I've talked to people, where I've helped people move here, or maybe I've had people from here move there, and see kind of what these different sites think that a person moving from one area would need to make here in Denver to live a similar lifestyle. So going off of that idea and using Bankrate as one of my websites, salary.com. So if you made $100,000 and you were moving from, say, Austin, Texas to Denver, you would need to make $111,213. Maybe you're moving from Los Angeles, California, because you're not a Chargers fan or a Rams fan. You're upset that the Raiders were in Oakland. I digress. And you were making 100 grand there. You are going to need to make a whopping $72,636 in Denver to live that same lifestyle. Chicago, pretty comparative to Denver. If you're making 100 grand there, you need to make a little over 95,000 here in Denver. New York, I love you. So if you are moving from one of the boroughs, I chose Queens for this, and you were making 100 grand, you're going to need to make about $75,000 here in Denver, and I had to do it. If you're living in Manhattan and you're moving to Denver, you just need to make $45,000. Now, I also know that if you're living in Manhattan off 100 grand, I want to see the closet you're moving out of. A few more popular ones. If you're coming out here from Nashville, you're going to need to make roughly 110,000. Phoenix, again, pretty close. You'd need to make about 105,000 moving here to Denver. Tampa, Florida, sitting at about 113,000. If you're making 100 in Tampa, you're going to need to make about 113,000 here in Denver. A city that draws a lot of comparisons to Denver for its growth, its new development, a lot of people heading there. Charlotte, North Carolina. If you're moving from Charlotte to Denver, you're going to need to make about $111,668. And because I love my Midwest folks, I lived in Ohio for a couple years while I was working in broadcast. So if you're moving from Cleveland to Denver, maybe you're over Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns and you just want to accept the fact that the Denver Broncos are calling you to drive. You need to make about $93,000 moving here to Denver. Keeping in mind, some of these areas like Chicago and Cleveland have that higher property tax. So this is taking that into mind as though you were a homeowner. Regardless, is Denver a cheap place to live? It depends on where you're coming from. Folks from San Francisco, Seattle, Washington, D.C., L.A., and Miami, Manhattan, they're saying, oh heck yeah it is. My folks coming from the South, my folks coming from the Midwest, they tend to think that Denver is pricey and have to make a lot of life adjustments for it. Either way, it's going to be all based on your perspective, and I'm here for it and would love to have a conversation with you about it. So the number and email you see on your screen, know that I am always the person. Answer your phone calls, answer your texts, answer your emails. There, win in if you need me. This is Destination Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jimmy Everts. That was Can I Afford to Live in Denver, Colorado? Until I see you next time, Peace.